1996. World Championship Wrestling became a big thing for a couple of years due to the new hotness that was the New World Order, and apparently that meant they were deserving of a hit new video game. And so THQ gave the world WCW Vs The World for the Sony PlayStation in 1997. Essentially a repackaged version of the 1996 Japanese release Virtual Pro Wrestling, WCW Vs The World gave you over 50 wrestlers to play with only about a dozen or so of those wrestlers being actual WCW names. The rest of the roster would comprise mostly made-up names, partially based on actual Japanese wrestlers who probably would have been in the old Virtual Pro Wrestling game, but remade here to be less infringing, shall we say. In any event, it sticks with the general theme of WCW taking on the world, as the name of the game implies. Those hoping for NWO representation in WCW's first 3D venture would have to settle for Hollywood Hulk Hogan as a secondary skin for the red and yellow Hulkster. But hey, the Crow Sting is in there, so you can recreate that Starrcade main event and probably do a better job of it than WCW did back in the day, but I digress. There are a couple of modes of play that you could fiddle around with: a quick exhibition match, a league challenge where you have a wrestler go through the ranks of one of several organizations in order to win their championship, a round-robin tournament, creating your own belt and defending your made-up belts against other players. So you've got some variety in play modes. However, in terms of match types, you only have the singular one-on-one match. Nothing fancy like a steel cage match or battle royals or even the standard tag team contest, which is quite disappointing, but hey, baby steps I suppose. In terms of the actual gameplay now, it operates simply enough with a fairly straightforward control scheme that comprises a strike button and a grapple button amongst other things. Tapping these buttons will give you light attacks, while holding these buttons will execute strong attacks. Pressing these buttons in conjunction with direction on the D-pad will execute other moves in your arsenal, and each wrestler has a wide arsenal of attacks to wear their opponent down for the count, enough that they could score the winning pinfall or make their opponent submit in a grueling hold. As the match progresses, the color of your spirit meter changes. The more damage you take, the redder it becomes. However, the more momentum you build with varied attacks, the whiter it gets, and once that spirit meter flashes, you'll be able to perform stronger moves and inflict more damage for a short term before the meter resets back to its default level. Anyway, I'm just skimming through the basics here, and it does take a match or two to learn how the game functions, but on the whole, it's a pretty simple yet somewhat involved setup, what with the varying of weak and strong attacks, the various wrestler styles and whatnots. While the pacing is a bit sluggish and the controls aren't quite fine-tuned, the gameplay is playable. The moveset is wide and varied enough. It's somewhat similar to the game engine that would grace the Nintendo 64 with several noteworthy wrestling games like Revenge or No Mercy. And if you enjoyed those games, then playing WCW Vs The World shouldn't be too problematic since it's a precursor to those games. Perhaps not quite as finely tuned or polished, but similar. And if you've never played those games, then that's okay too. A match or two, like I said, to learn everything is all it really takes. The graphics of WCW Vs The World can be best described as very, very crude, even by the standards of 1997. I find it funny that WCW's talent has these hand-drawn portraits that are actually well done and capture the likeness of the wrestlers just fine, and then the rest of the roster have these pre-rendered faces that were apparently created from the same stock generated template. It's during the actual matches where the crudeness is apparent, with these rough-looking, very polygonal and jaggy-looking wrestler models with really awkward animations. The arena looks alright, with a ring that changes colors and logos to represent the different leagues in the game. Presentation-wise, it's nothing special. There are no wrestler entrances, no victory animations, nothing really noteworthy, although the opening montage of WCW clips is of decent quality, so that's something, I guess. Meanwhile, over in the sound department, you have a soundtrack that comprises some stock Japanese-sounding rock tunes that sound very Japan, which makes it very good elevator music that probably doesn't say a whole lot, and that's okay, because there's little to say in regards outside of the music being played off the CD, which means music will fade out and loop, or if your CD is scratched up enough, it'll start skipping or not play altogether. There's nothing in the way of familiar WCW themes to be found, nor will you find commentary if you cared for such things. However, you do get some Japan tracks that sound very Japan, and I'll take these Japan tracks that sound very Japan and cheesy over whatever licensed garbage is creeping up the current WWE video game scene any day of the week. Overall, WCW Vs The World is without question the best WCW wrestling video game to grace the Sony PlayStation, which, considering what came afterwards, isn't exactly a great accomplishment, but I digress. WCW Vs The World provided the template that would be served best on the Nintendo 64 with that console's run of wrestling titles, and any of those games can be enjoyed to this day, yes, even World Tour. WCW Vs The World is an interesting curiosity that feels a bit primitive and definitely looks as such, but if you're willing to overlook some of the quirks or you just want to see where it all began, then WCW Vs The World is probably worth checking out for the novelty factor. It plays well enough, it's fun for a lark, and that's about all it offers, so yeah, WCW Vs The World. An oldie, but still somewhat of a goodie.